What is going on, everybody? And welcome to episode number 1 of the Crypt podcast. I hope you're all doing well, doing great. It's Monday morning right now. Sun is shining. Things are beautiful out there today. Hopefully, it's going to be a warm one. Funny thing about episode 1 here of the podcast, I had a whole thing planned. A completely different subject planned for the first podcast here. And over the last few days, I have received some, rather bad news, and we're going to go a whole different direction. It's a podcast. I know on my main channel, I cemetery explore and I highlight at times famous people or notable people and their graves. But this podcast can go either way. We could talk about whatever we want. So let's talk about something that I've experienced the last few days and more than once the last few months. It's loss. Somebody dying. It's never an easy road when you know somebody that had just passed, especially at the age that I'm at right now, that we're at. I'm 52 years old, and in the last 3 or 4 months, I've experienced loss twice, and it's people who are roughly the same age as me, which is really, really insane. And, people in their early 50s, like I am. I'm in my early 50s. Yeah, I was saying, well, I'm in my 50s, but I'm 52, so I guess I'm still in my early 50s. And it's just a wild, weird feeling. And over the weekend here, the last couple days over the weekend, I had received word that a person that I knew that I worked with like 25 years ago had just passed, diagnosed with the big C. And I'm not talking about COVID here. They operated. They couldn't get it all out. They were trying to shrink it with radiation. His sister had been posting updates on Facebook. He looked pretty good. He was getting visitors. He looked like his old self, except that he was sick. He didn't look physically sick in the pictures. He looked like he was happy. He was smiling. And every week or so, she was posting these updates about him. And things seemed hopeful until she had mentioned that the radiation is only going to buy them more time with him. And after I heard that, I was like, oh, wow. On the outside, he looked great, but I guess on the inside, he wasn't doing too well. But still, continued to get visitors. She would post pictures from his different friends visiting him. I was trying to think about hammering down a day to go see him. And over the weekend, I gotten the word that he had passed. And it must have been really sudden. He must have declined really quick because, like I said, the pictures his sister has been posting, he looked great. And it's just, it's such a hard thing to process. A few months ago, before this, I had somebody I went to high school with, roughly the same age, pass from the same thing. And that person had been fighting the big C, had been fighting that for a couple of years prior. My friend here that I worked with, it seems like they only just diagnosed him like a few months ago. And, it seemed as though things had, declined rapidly. And you're trying to process it. I remember my coworker, working with them. We'd always have a good time. We would always, be laughing and, cutting up and doing all kinds of stuff, having a great time. Like I said, I worked with him probably about 25, 26 years ago. He had moved on and went to another company, we had kept in touch after that. I physically probably haven't seen him face to face for about 18 or 19 years, but through Facebook and stuff, we'd always kept in touch. It'd always be a, quick Facebook message back and forth, maybe a text. We always were like, oh yeah, we got to get together for lunch. and we got to do this and that and catch up. And, he lived kind of far from me, not super far, but he lived a ways out from me. So that lunch, this is before he got sick. We would talk about having lunch and everything. And that just lunch never happened. Life gets in the way, and, just things never happened. Had I known this several years ago when him and I would talk back and forth, I would have made sure I had that lunch, and I would have made sure I had, several lunches with him, but like I said, life gets in the way. He had a family, I had a family, and life gets in the way, and then, you just forget, and lately I've been trying to hammer down a day, like I said, to go see him, knowing that he was ill. And before I could do that, I guess, he declined and he passed. He had a daughter. She got married before he got sick. She got married about a year ago. And he was able, to be there for that, So I'm glad he at least got to see his daughter get married. My classmate that passed before him had a couple kids. They were older, and I hadn't seen my classmate face to face since probably graduation day, around graduation, which was in 1991. And but I was keeping up on his progress through a mutual friend. And I think it was probably right around the holidays, my former classmate passed. And it leaves you gutted. It leaves you feeling like this person is way too young. I know we're in our 50s, but I just feel like it's just, way too young. And even before that, we've had over the last 30 something years, we've had several classmates pass. It's just. So today's episode is a deeply, deeply personal one. If you clicked on this episode, chances are you've recently lost someone close to you, a friend, a family member, maybe even someone who wasn't super close, but still left a mark on your life. First off, I want to say I'm really sorry. Loss is heavy. It changes things, and it's something we all go through. But no two people experience it the same way. Today, I just want to talk with you. No advice you have to follow. No quick fix. Coping tips. Just a conversation about grief. What it looks like and how we start to live with it. When someone dies, especially suddenly, your brain scrambles, and I mean scrambles to make sense of it. You might find yourself going over your last conversation, wondering if you missed a sign, wishing you had said or done something different. And listen, I get it. That's your heart trying to understand what just happened. But grief isn't logical. It's messy. It hits you in waves. Sometimes you'll feel totally okay, and then out of nowhere, bam, something small, like maybe a song or a smell, just knocks the air out of you. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That means you're human. People don't talk enough about how weird grief is or feels. You might feel numb when you think you're supposed to be crying. You might laugh at something and then feel guilty for laughing. You might cry while doing dishes for no reason at all. There's no right way. And I really seriously mean there's no right way to mourn. Some people need to talk about it. Others need to stay quiet for a while. Some need a distraction. Some need solitude. Whatever your way is, it's okay. Unless it's hurting you or others, and then it's time to reach out for help. And that's okay too. One of the hardest things after someone passes is the silence that they leave behind. No more texts, no more phone calls, no more drop ins or birthday messages. I can't believe it. It's crazy. It's a weird feeling. And here's something that helps me: talk to them, say their name out loud, share memories with people who knew them, write them letters, even if nobody reads them, light a candle, look at old photos. You don't have to let go of them to move forward. You just learn how to carry their memory in a new way. If someone you know is also grieving, remember, you don't need perfect words. Just showing up is enough. Sometimes the best thing you can say is, I don't know. I don't know what to say, but I'm here. And if you're the one grieving, let people show up for you. You don't have to be strong all the time. If someone asks you, how are you holding up? And if you're not, say so. Grief doesn't need a filter. The people we love don't disappear. Their voice, their laughter, their quirks, all of that stays with us. In the places they loved, in the food they made, in the stories they told. You're not crazy for hearing them. You're not crazy for hearing them in your head. You're not stuck in the past for holding on to their memory. That's part of healing. That's part of being alive. As we wrap up, I just want to say this. You're not alone in this. Even if it feels like the world has moved on and you're still frozen in that moment, frozen in that time, you're not the only one. Grief is the price of love. And although it hurts, it's also a reminder of how deeply we're capable of caring. And my buddy Ron, my buddy Richard, it's a wild, wild thing. I know my coworker Ron. I remember, we would work together. We would hang out, outside of work at times. One time I remember we worked till midnight. We would work like the 3 to midnight shift. It would be the closing shift. And we would work till midnight. At one time when we got off, him and I drove all the way to Reno, Nevada to gamble. We drove all night, or a good chunk of the night, got there early morning, got something to eat. We went into the casinos and gambled for a little while. And, then we got a, we got a room, and we slept for a few hours, and crashed out and drove back home here to Northern California. Little adventures like that, at first when I found out he had passed, I remember just thinking about working with him. And just now when I was talking, the memory of that trip came up, and it made me smile, made me chuckle. When you got friends, you do crazy stuff like that when you're young. You drive all night to Reno, to LA, and those are the memories you look fondly back on. I'll never forget Ron. He was a good dude. My classmate Rich was a good dude as well. I just hadn't really had much contact with him since graduation. But Ron was somebody that I would talk to sporadically, and little messages on Facebook or text messages, and we'd have a quick conversation back and forth, and then go on with our lives. And it's crazy. Like I said, his daughter just got married. Like I said, I'm glad that he was at least able to see his daughter get married. I remember seeing the wedding pictures on Facebook he had posted, and he was so proud, of his daughter. He was proud of her before she got married too. I could totally tell, you know. And that day that he was father of the bride in the wedding, he was very proud. You can just see the look on his face, the joy in his eyes. And like I said, I'm glad he at least got to experience that before he passed. And I still feel weird. I still feel like we're all too young for this mess, you know? But that is part of getting older, you know? That's part of the aging process. The older you get, the more you're going to deal with this stuff. And it's unfortunate, It's really unfortunate. It's, it's very sad. Last couple of days, I haven't slept well because I'm just like thinking, there's been my friend, my coworker there. There's been several people in my life, like I said, from high school over the years that have passed. And it's just made me reflect on a lot of stuff. And it's made me do a lot of thinking. And like I said, I haven't slept well the last few days. And, it's a different experience because when it's a family member, like an elderly family member, I mean, it's unfortunate still, but when it's like an older family member, you kind of expect it. You kind of expect that. You kind of see it coming over the years. It's still sad, it still hurts you, but they're older, they might have a health condition or health conditions, and you kind of brace yourself for that. My father died a few years ago. He had health conditions. It was one of those things where, over the years, both, when we're young, our mom, our mother, our father, they're very, very strong. When you're a kid, your parents are like, Superman, Superwoman, that, they're bulletproof. They're your protector. They're there for you to take care of you. And then as they start to age and maybe health issues start popping up, you kind of see as you get older and they start having health issues, you start seeing the cracks in the armor, so to say. So, when my father was starting to get older and older, start to see the crack in the armor, another crack in the armor, more cracks in the armor. So you kind of, at least for me, it was, I started to brace myself for my father not being around a whole lot more years. Because, he had health issues. He wasn't taking care of himself. So you kind of braced yourself for that. My mom is in a little bit better health, but still, my mom, you could see the cracks in the armor, and like I said, it's just a part of getting older. It's part of us getting older and having to deal with this stuff more often. But when it's someone my age, I'm early 50s. When it's someone my age that passes, it's just like, wow. You struggle to try to process it and, figure out what happened. Why are we in this position? We're too young, but it's part of life. Like I said, in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, you just have to deal with it more, unfortunately, But I've had a few people that I was friends with over the years pass too young. It just makes no sense. It's just not fair. These people have families, wives, kids. Sometimes the person is so cool and so the person was such a good person. You go, damn. That's ridiculous. How did that happen? But it happens. It's part of life. There's not much we can do about it. The only it's it's the truth. That saying, the only for sure thing is death and taxes. And yeah, that's crazy. But like I said, it's okay to not be okay. When you're grieving, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. There's not. You have to grieve in your own way. When my father passed, I guess I was trying to be the strong one. As the days progressed, I had my moments where I would break down and cry. And people told me that, yeah, it may not be hitting you hard right now, but in the coming days, weeks, months, it will. And so after my father passed, I was trying to be the strong one. And about 2 months after he passed, actually 3 months after he passed, we were planning a celebration of life, for my father, my sister and I. And he was cremated. We hadn't bought him his spot in the mausoleum yet, or in the columbarium yet. And the reality of it set in when I saw his urn sitting there. They had, my sister had his urn on a table with some pictures of him and his second wife. Pictures of him in life with his sisters and his brother-in-laws, all of them that are all passed now. His 3 sisters and their husbands are all gone. They've all passed. And the gravity of that hit me like 3 or 4 months later at that celebration of life we had for our father. So like I said, you're going to process grief your own way. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. And, don't let anybody, tell you any different. Oh, boy. This conversation brought back a lot of memories for me and did just different aspects of my life, I'm glad I was able to share this with you. I'm glad I was able to talk with you guys. You guys are appreciated. I want you to know that. All right, guys, I guess we're done here. Like I said, I was going to do a video on something completely different, and I got all this bad news over the last couple days, and I decided to go a different direction. This podcast, it could be whatever I want it to be. I do some on my main channel. I do cemetery exploring. This is called the Crypt podcast, but this could be anything. And you're probably going to get a lot of different things out of me on this podcast, not just cemetery exploring related. I'll probably do certain graves or certain, cemeteries or, certain city, about that has a lot of cemeteries. But this podcast is going to be multi-everything. So those of you who have sat here and listened to me ramble for the last 20 minutes roughly, you guys are the super, super real ones, and I do appreciate you if you're at the end of this video. All right, guys, do me a favor. On the way out, hit the like button on this. Leave a comment. Let whatever platform you're seeing me on or hearing me on know that I'm doing a decent job. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and most podcasting platforms. There is an audio and video version of this podcast. And I do appreciate you guys. You guys are deeply appreciated. I know this for a first episode, this was a pretty heavy subject, but something I felt like I needed to get out. And I actually feel 100% better. All right, guys, thank you all so much. I am Tony, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Crypt podcast. See you next time.